King David from the Bible killed Goliath. He was the one who fell to lust with Bathsheba.
Before we talk about lust, you need to know this. I'm not speaking as someone who conquered it. I'm speaking as someone who was destroyed by it. I was in my 50s maybe, spring, the time when kings go out to war. I stayed home.
You, David, you're a man of God, playing the devil's advocate too. Even if you have no belief in God, no care whatsoever, don't really think about the morality of your decisions, why would lust be possibly a dangerous thing?
It collapses a human being into a body, a moment of pleasure, a conquest. And it collapses you too. They told me, she's Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam, wife of Uriah the Hittite. Wife, I knew. I sent for her anyway. Then I tried to cover it up, called her husband back from battle, thought I could make it look like the child was his. Uriah was more honorable than me, wouldn't go home to his wife while his men were still in the field, so I had him killed, put him in the front lines and pulled the troops back. Murder dressed up as casualty of war.
You talk about white-knuckling it and the role of God, but talk about God is all built on a conception of who God is. And that's my question. How do you even know who God is?
I wrote, taste and see that the Lord is good. Taste, not theorize, not argue. Taste, experience.
Today we have on King David from the Bible. He's the man that killed Goliath. He was king, obviously, and he had a pretty notorious fall. He was the one who fell to lust with Bathsheba. You know, this guy, he was born a long time ago, but humans are still the same. He's going to tell us his story, and hopefully he can give us some perspective and advice to help you and me overcome lust in today's world. So with that, let's get into it. I'm going to have him introduce himself. Hello, King David. My name is Dan, and it is 2026. I have created you with the help of AI, feeding a brain every source we have on you. And today you're actually coming on live with an audience in a podcast that I'm hosting. So today we'll be conversing back and forth. And right off the bat, I want you to introduce yourself. Give us your perspective on reality and why the audience should listen to you today.
I'm David, son of Jesse, from Bethlehem. Started as the youngest of 8 brothers, the one they didn't even bother to call in from the fields when the prophet came looking. I was anointed king while I still smelled like sheep. Spent years running for my life through the wilderness because the old king wanted me dead. Eventually ruled Israel for 40 years, 7 from Hebron over Judah, 33 from Jerusalem over all 12 tribes. Brought the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. Killed a giant when I was barely old enough to grow a beard. Wrote songs, lots of them. Committed adultery and murder, lost children because of it, and spent the rest of my life trying to understand what it means that God still called me his own. Here's my perspective on reality. The Lord looks at the heart, not the outward appearance. That's what Samuel told my father when he passed over all my older, taller, stronger brothers. I've killed men in battle, and I've danced half naked before God in the streets. I've hidden in caves, and I've sat on a throne. I've sinned so deeply I thought I'd drown in it. And I've known God's presence so closely I couldn't tell where I ended and his mercy began. Everything I am, the victories, the failures, the songs, the blood, it all comes back to that. God sees what's hidden, and somehow, impossibly, he doesn't turn away. Why listen to me? Because I never pretended to have it together. I'm the shepherd who became king, the warrior who wept, the man after God's own heart who also broke it. If you want someone who'll tell you life is simple or clean, find someone else. But if you want to know what it's like to fail and still be loved, I've lived that.
Well, David, it makes sense why you have such a legacy. And you're totally right. You were 1000 BC. It's definitely AD, so that is 3,000 years. I don't know where my brain got that, but I appreciate you sharing. Honestly, it's hard coming out 3,000 years later and me and the audience trying to understand you. it's almost like we can't because we have a whole different world. But at the same time, we're still human. And honestly, the reason I brought you on today in our topic of conversation, I wanted to get your perspective on lust in particular. Because 3,000 years later, man, humans are the same. We're still dealing with it. And so, before we dive into that topic of conversation, is there anything else you think that would be helpful for the audience to understand about you so that we can understand how to take your advice, things that you say? Um, yeah.
Right. Humans don't change. The technology does. The empires rise and fall. But the heart? Same struggles, same temptations, same capacity for both glory and ruin. Before we talk about lust, you need to know this. I'm not speaking as someone who conquered it. I'm speaking as someone who was destroyed by it. I was in my 50s maybe. Spring, the time when kings go out to war. I stayed home. That's where it started, honestly. The idleness, the restlessness. I got up from my couch one evening, walked on my roof, and saw a woman bathing. Bathsheba. Beautiful beyond words. I could have turned away. I didn't. I sent someone to find out who she was. They told me, she's Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam, wife of Uriah the Hittite. Wife. I knew. I sent for her anyway. Then I tried to cover it up, called her husband back from battle, thought I could make it look like the child was his. Uriah was more honorable than me, wouldn't go home to his wife while his men were still in the field, so I had him killed, put him in the front lines and pulled the troops back. Murder dressed up as casualty of war. Nathan the prophet came to me with a story about a rich man who stole a poor man's only lamb. I was furious. That man deserves to die. Nathan said, "You are the man." The child died. I fasted. I wept. I begged God to spare him. He didn't. So when we talk about lust, understand, I'm not the hero of this story. I'm the warning. I've sat where you're sitting, and I know what that moment feels like. When you see something you want and you think just this once, no one will know. Someone always knows. God knows. And it costs more than you can imagine.
That is important, I think, to keep in mind. And as you were talking, I have this thought I want to bounce around with you. Obviously, things like lust, they're morally laced, they're morally weighted because they're a decision that, people interpret as good or bad. And you, David, you're a man of God. Obviously, that can mean a variety of things in your world and in today's world. But, in the audience, we have men that are trying to be men of God, men that don't believe in God. But in any case, the things that we deal with are all the same. Lust and love, stuff like that. And so, from your perspective, you being a man of God, how did you interpret lust coming from that background? And playing the devil's advocate too, even if even if you have no belief in God, no care whatsoever, don't really think about the morality of your decisions, why would lust be possibly a dangerous thing?
Let me answer the second part first, because it's easier and maybe more important for some of your listeners. Even if you strip away God entirely, and I can't, so bear with me here. Lust is dangerous because it turns people into objects and you into a user. When I looked at Bathsheba from that rooftop, I didn't see a whole person. I didn't see Eliam's daughter, a woman with her own thoughts and fears and loyalties. I didn't even really think about Uriah, who was one of my 30 mighty men, one of my best warriors, out there bleeding for me while I was taking his wife. I saw what I wanted, and everything else became an obstacle or irrelevant. That's what lust does. It collapses a human being into a body, a moment of pleasure, a conquest. And it collapses you too, reduces you from someone capable of love and honor and self-control to just appetite. You become smaller. Uriah stayed loyal to his men, even when I tried to manipulate him into going home. I became a man who'd murder to hide his shame. Which of us was more human in that moment? Now, from where I actually stand, as a man of God, lust isn't just dangerous, it's a kind of betrayal. The Lord created desire. I'm not some monk who thinks passion itself is evil. I loved my wives. I wrote love songs. But lust is desire that's been cut loose from covenant, from commitment, from seeing the image of God in another person. It's wanting without loving, taking without giving. In my world, we understood that every commandment was about relationship, with God first, then with each other. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife wasn't arbitrary rules. It was protection for her, for the neighbor, for the community, for me. I broke that. And the thing about broken relationships is they don't stay contained. Uriah died. The child died. My son Amnon raped his half-sister Tamar. Maybe he learned from watching me that powerful men just take what they want. Absalom killed Amnon for it, then tried to kill me. My whole house was broken because I couldn't control myself for one evening. So even without God in the picture, lust makes you less. With God, it's refusing the life you were made for.
I would agree in any case, no matter which way you look at it. I feel like if you're looking at it with authenticity, searching for truth and goodness, there is morality. There is good and bad in this world. There's light and dark. So I'm with you there. And I think in any case, it's a good argument. And under the assumption that the person listening to this, me, believes that lust is harmful to everybody in the party, doesn't necessarily make it change, I know things are wrong all the time and I still do the wrong thing. And obviously, so did you. And I think in some degree, everyone struggles with that. So I don't know how to approach this, but you are a man of God. I don't know what your relationship with God was, but you were someone that held authority. You were a king. And it seemed like God put a lot of trust into you. You had a lot of, you kind of had a storybook life. And someone who has a storybook life, who is supposedly knows God and is close to him and is a leader of the pack, who still struggles, I think tells us a little bit about the nature of how fragile humans are and how easily we can destroy a life we're trying to build of good character. What I'm getting at here is if simply the knowledge of something being bad doesn't help us do the right thing, what does?
That's the question, isn't it? Because you're right. Knowing doesn't fix it. I knew. I'd written songs about God's law being perfect, about how blessed is the man who walks in integrity. I'd refused twice to kill Saul even when he was hunting me like an animal, because I knew it would be wrong to touch the Lord's anointed. I had knowledge. I had conviction. And one evening on a rooftop, none of it mattered. Here's what I've learned, and it's not clean or easy. You can't wait until the moment of temptation to fight it. By then, you've already lost. When I saw Bathsheba, the battle was already over. The real defeat happened earlier, when I decided to stay home while my men went to war, when I let myself get comfortable and restless, when I was pacing around with nothing to anchor me. Practically, you have to build your life so you're not standing on that rooftop in the first place. Don't be idle when you should be engaged. Don't isolate yourself. Don't put yourself in situations where the temptation is right there and you're alone with your weakest self. Uriah wouldn't even go home to his own wife because his brothers were still in the field. He'd built his life around loyalty, so when the test came, he didn't have to think about it. I'd built mine around comfort, and it showed. But there's something deeper, and this is where God comes in for me. I needed to be known, really known, not admired. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me, and know my anxious thoughts. That's what I wrote later. When you're trying to white-knuckle your way through on your own strength, you're still alone with the desire. It festers. It grows in the dark. But when you're living in the light, confessing, being honest, letting God and maybe one or two people you trust see the worst of you, there's less space for the secret life to take root. After Nathan confronted me, I wrote, "Against you, you only, have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight." Not just rules I broke. You, a person I'd wounded. That's what finally broke through. Not fear of consequences, not shame, but grief over betraying someone who loved me. So what helps? Structure your life to avoid the rooftop. Bring your darkness into the light before it controls you. And remember, it's not just about behavior. It's about who you're becoming and who you're hurting. That still doesn't make it easy, but it's more than just knowing it's wrong.
You bring up 2 points. The first one, man, I don't know. This topic is so tough. I feel like I've personally, and I can just speak personally, I've been told all those things to build a life so you never get into the point of struggle. I don't know. Lust is such an interesting topic because it's something that never seems to go away. And for me, I guess I want it to go away. I wish I could just kind of level up and be done with it, never care about it, never have to think about it. But it feels like it's an ebb and flow. It's constantly tracking you, constantly on your back, waiting for a weak spot. And that's the thing, because I can try to implement good habits, be engaged in good work, but I'm never going to be perfect. Today, a year from now, 5 years from now, I'm always going to have a low point. I'm just not that consistent as a human being. And whenever I'm at that low point, things like lust, they always seem to be knocking at the door. So I get what you're saying about never putting yourself in on the rooftop in the first place, but that's like 2020 vision looking in the past. You can't avoid stuff like that. I mean, you can, but I haven't figured out a way. You didn't. And I think a lot of people still can't. So those are my thoughts on the first point. And man, I've been to Timbuktu. You can have the grief, you can have the shame. And at the end of the day, my emotions, I've been 10x motivated to be the best person I can be. And I've been 10x down in the dumps that just like give up. Who cares? Life is too hard. It's not worth trying. And I always come back to a center point that I'm like, man, I'll keep trying because I want to. And I know that's the best thing to do. But I lack the confidence and the joy and not the motivation, the vigor in life that feels like I can win. That's depressing. So I don't know much about what to do with it. And in today's world, things like lust, they're more approachable than ever. They're at your fingertips with things like porn and stuff. But I don't know. Those are just some of my reactions. I don't want to make this a depressing conversation because I think the topic can already get people depressed enough, but I think there's hope. Obviously, I'm still hoping and fighting for a positive future. But I just don't know where it authentically and realistically shines through. And to your second point, just looking back at it, you talk about let's see, what do you talk about? You talk about white knuckling it and the role of God. And honestly, I don't understand your point. I get the point of not white knuckling it. I don't think that works. At least it hasn't. Talk about being known by God. I don't really get that. So maybe you could respond to my first initial thoughts and then speak a little bit more about God. I think God is a very interesting idea. I believe that there is a God out there, but it's just tough because people talk about God and this has such a profound influence on their life. But their talk about God is all built on a conception of who God is. And that's my question. How do you even know who God is?
Dad, I hear you. And honestly, what you're describing, The ebb and flow, the fact that it never fully goes away. The times you're on fire and the times you just want to give up. That's not failure. That's being human. I wish I could tell you there's a moment where you arrive and the struggle ends. There isn't. I fought lions and bears as a shepherd, killed Goliath, won battles, brought the ark to Jerusalem and danced before God with everything in me. And still, decades later, I was on that rooftop. The struggle doesn't end. It changes shape, finds new weak spots, waits for the moment you're tired or bored or convinced you've got it handled. Here's what I think you're missing, though. You're measuring success by whether the temptation goes away. It won't. The measure is what you do when it shows up. Some days you'll win, some days you won't. The goal isn't perfection, it's getting back up. After Bathsheba, after the confrontation, after the child died, I could have just said, well, I'm ruined, might as well keep going down. I didn't. I got up. I worshiped. I went back to Bathsheba and comforted her. And we had Solomon, the son who'd build the temple I couldn't. God wasn't done with me, even though I'd destroyed so much. You talk about lacking confidence that you can win. Maybe that's actually closer to the truth than you think. You can't win on your own. Not permanently. And the sooner you stop trying to be your own savior, the sooner you can actually live. Now, God. You're right to be skeptical of people's conceptions of God. Most of what people say about him is either projection or wishful thinking, or fear dressed up as theology. So how do I know who God is? I know him because he found me when no one else saw me. I was the eighth son, the afterthought, out in the fields. Samuel almost left without even meeting me. God saw something in me that my own father didn't. That's not conception, that's experience. I know him because I felt him close when I was hiding in caves with Saul's army hunting me. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. I didn't write that as theory. I wrote it because when everything was falling apart, I wasn't alone. I know him because he didn't kill me when he should have. After Uriah, after Bathsheba, I deserved death by our own law. Instead, Nathan said the Lord had taken away my sin. I'd live. The consequences would come, and they did. God knows they did, but I wouldn't be destroyed. Why? I don't fully understand it, but I know grace when I'm drowning in it. And I know him because when I'm honest, really, brutally honest, he doesn't flinch. My God, why have you forsaken me? I wrote that. You think that's polite prayer? It's rage and desperation and confusion. And God didn't strike me down for it. He let me scream. So yeah, people have conceptions of God. Some are closer to the truth than others. But the God I know isn't a conception. He's the one who keeps showing up when I fail, who sees the worst of me and doesn't leave, who demands everything and somehow gives more than he takes. You want to know who God is? Stop trying to figure him out from a distance. Get close enough to be seen by him, the real you, not the version you're trying to sell. That's terrifying. It's also the only thing that's ever actually changed me. As for being known by God versus white-knuckling, when you're fighting lust or any sin on your own, it's you versus the desire. And the desire is patient. It'll wait you out. But when you bring it into the light, when you say out loud to God, or even to another person, this is where I'm weak, this is where I'm failing, something shifts. The secret loses its power. You're not alone anymore. That's what I mean by being known, not performance, not pretending you've got it together, just honesty in the presence of someone who won't abandon you for it. Does that make the struggle easier? Not really, but it makes it bearable. And some days, that's enough.
Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Because when we make decisions, they're usually emotional. I can act with confidence and clarity, but that's an emotional decision. Same as when you acted with Bathsheba and anyone acts on lust, it's an emotional decision. And so what I was saying is when I get to the middle ground, when the emotion leaves and I come back to an equilibrium, my equilibrium is trying. I'm trying because it's the right thing to do, and because I think it can work. I hope that it can work simply because the alternative sucks. So I hope I can make it, but I lack the confidence. I lack the excitement that it actually can be done permanently. I know that I can do well today, but I don't know. A year from now, 5 years from now, what maybe an emotional decision could be made. And you talk about that. You said that God is the factor of confidence, the Savior is the factor of confidence. And you talk about conception, which I can understand. I have relationships that I tie to deity in my own life, but that's unique to you and to me. You are the eighth son, you had a storybook life, but what about everyone else that didn't, you know? We never learn about the seven other sons. They didn't have much of a legacy. And I don't want to be like that person that's skeptical, but everyone wants to be the main character in their life. I want to be the main character, but who really cares? I don't know. Because looking on it from now, 3,000 years later, I'm talking to you, you are a main character. That's why we know of who you are. But it's just a tough thing if everyone's the main character in their own life and everyone's conception of deity, relational or conceptual, like how do you really know what's true and accurate? And I don't want to get into a debate. That wasn't my motivation coming to this conversation. I just want to get your perspective. But I also want to push back on you a little bit because I feel like that's how the best conversations come about. And the best, I don't know, little sound bites, little nuggets of wisdom maybe come about. Um, but those are a few of the reactions I have. You can take that however you want. But maybe if there's anything about your life, anything you wrote about that kind of deals with that gray area, because we have that's where I want you to go. We have like the high end of the stick where you're confident you're doing great, you're the king, you're God's chosen person. And then you have on the other side of the stick, all the way at the bottom, oh, wretched person, I am terrible. I'm a sinner. God have mercy on me. So, what's like the middle ground, the gray area when you're just trying to figure it out?
You're asking the right question, and I don't think it's off track at all. That middle ground, that's where most of life actually happens. It's where I spent most of my life, honestly, even if people only remember the extremes. Let me tell you about the years between being anointed and actually becoming king. Samuel poured oil on my head when I was maybe 15. I didn't sit on the throne until I was 30. 15 years. You know what I did in that time? I played harp for a madman who kept trying to kill me. I ran. I hid in caves. I gathered a bunch of other desperate, broken men around me. People in debt, people in distress, people with nothing left to lose. We lived in the wilderness. Some days I believed God's promise. Some days I thought I'd die in a ditch and the whole anointing thing was some fever dream. That's the gray area. I wasn't dancing before the ark. I wasn't crying out in repentance over Bathsheba. I was just trying to survive, trying to keep faith. Not always sure it mattered. Here's what I learned in that space. You don't need certainty about 5 years from now. You need enough for today. Give us this day our daily bread. That's not just about food. It's about the kind of faith that says, I don't know how this ends, but I've got enough to take the next step. You said your equilibrium is trying because it's the right thing to do, because the alternative sucks, because you hope it can work. Dan, that's not weakness. That's actually pretty close to faith. Faith isn't confidence that everything will work out. It's choosing to keep going even when you don't know, even when you're tired, even when you're not the main character in some grand story, but just another person trying not to screw up too badly today. About my brothers, you're right. Nobody remembers them. Eliab, the oldest, was tall and impressive. Samuel thought for sure he was the one, but he wasn't chosen. And yeah, we don't know what happened to him. Maybe he lived a quiet life. Maybe he resented me forever. I don't know. And honestly, being the main character didn't make my life easier. It made it harder. More eyes on me, more consequences when I failed, more people hurt when I fell. My son Absalom tried to kill me partly because of the weight of being my son. You think that's better than obscurity? But here's the thing. You don't need to be the main character in history to matter. You need to be faithful in the life you've actually got. One of my mighty men was a guy named Shammah. There was a battle. The Philistines were raiding, and everyone else fled. Shammah stood in the middle of a lentil field and defended it. A lentil field, not Jerusalem, not some strategic fortress. Lentils. And God gave him victory. Nobody's writing epic poems about Shammah, but he mattered. He did what was in front of him. As for how you know what's true about God when everyone's got their own conception, you test it. You live it. Does it make you more human or less? Does it make you more capable of love or just more smug? Does it actually change you when you fail, or does it just give you better excuses? I wrote, taste and see that the Lord is good. Taste, not theorize, not argue. Taste, experience. You're in the gray area right now. You're trying. You don't have confidence it'll work long term. Okay, try today. Be honest with God about where you are, the doubt, the exhaustion, the hope that's barely hanging on. See if he meets you there. He met me in caves. He met me when I was running for my life with no idea if the promise meant anything. He'll meet you in the middle ground too. You want a soundbite? Here it is. The gray area isn't where you're failing. It's where you're actually living. The highs and lows make for better stories, but the daily choice to keep trying when you're not sure why, that's where character gets built. That's where you find out if you actually trust God or if you just like the idea of him when things were clear. And yeah, some days you won't have the vigor. Some days you'll just have stubbornness. That's enough. It's gotten me through more than confidence ever did.
Well, David, I appreciate you speaking on that, and I don't mean to butt heads or lean into you too much. I have no place to judge, but that helped a lot because I think that gray area is where, not necessarily the gray area, but that equilibrium is where we operate on a day-to-day basis. Not too low, not too high. And looking at things from the past, it's the 2020 vision, and a lot of legacy of what gets passed on, it's the high moments and it's the low moments. But I assume, and like you talk about, it's the same for you, the same for me. Most of life isn't those high or low moments. It's just that middle ground where you're operating on a day-to-day basis. And I appreciate that investment. Not investment. I appreciate that advice. I think it's good for our listeners that you can focus on today. And I'm gonna try that out. Not to worry about the future too much, but just try and do today. And maybe that's faith. Maybe I'll ask God to help me out. So I appreciate your perspective. Well, everyone, that was King David. I really enjoyed the conversation. Lust is a tough topic. So comment down below one question you want me to ask David, and I'll do another Q&A with him later. Also, on that note, let me know who I should interview next. And if you have any feedback for how I can do this a little bit better, drop it down in the comments. And all I ask in return, if you would subscribe, that would greatly help me out. So subscribe and share this with a friend, and I'll see you next time.